Do you like the metaverse? Because I like the metaverse, and I'm really excited that Virtua's Cardano Island is sponsoring this episode. Cardano Island is one of those projects I'm excited to have in our ecosystem. There are small, medium, and large plots, also condos, plans for 4 main sections, different zones and districts, fan caves to display NFTs, 6 different land resources, land bots, non-player character slots, slots for our Cardano Summit 2021 NFTs, other games, and lots more features. I bought a large plot on Cardano Island, and I can't wait to be on my land to see what this becomes. Check out cardano.virtua.com or click the link below. Myth plays an important role in human societies. It can be an incredible loom upon which to weave an enduring shared social fabric, like an origin story that can unite a group of people. It can also be used to enforce good behaviors, like don't harvest too many deer in any single year, or the spirits of the forest may turn against you. But we also sometimes create myths as a way to instill false confidence that an uncontrollable negative outcome will not occur. As long as the shaman does the ceremony on your boat before you leave, you don't have to worry about sinking in turbulent seas. In crypto, we've also embraced some myths to help us sleep a little better. But like Vikings on a sinking longship, sometimes you find out it was all just a story. Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss the arrest of the Tornado Cash developer and how that's the crossing of a new threshold, an interesting perspective on ETH2 and sanctioned transactions, some new Virtua information, some Cornucopias updates, and the Robbery Forest strikes yet again. If your first thought when you see the statue of Romulus, Remus, and the Capitoline wolf is, I could probably go for a little wolf milk in my coffee every once in a while. Or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Okay, unfortunately, here it is. You'll remember that Tornado Cash was placed on the sanctions list by the US government last week. And on Friday, you've probably already heard about it by now, but on Friday, Netherlands authorities arrested the developer of Tornado Cash. This is sort of an unfortunate development for the crypto space in general. We don't want to see our developers getting arrested for any reason, but this represents something much bigger than just legal trouble for one developer. This was an open source project being run on a decentralized basis. And those two things have been a part of this story we've been telling ourselves in crypto for a long time. That story goes like this. If you develop a project and it's open source and it's decentralized, and then you deploy that project and sort of walk away from it and just let it run, there won't be any problems. Even if the project you deploy, even if that platform enables people to do things in crypto that might be of questionable legality if it was happening outside of crypto. And we've been telling ourselves this story for a long time, especially in the case of DeFi projects, because one of the big things that happens in our DeFi projects is capital formation and the sale of things that outside of crypto, a lot of people would probably call securities. And we've been telling ourselves, hey, if it's decentralized and it's open source, then you can get away with those things. No one's going to go after you. We've told ourselves this story for so long that people have sort of quit asking the question, but why is that the case? Just like the shaman doing the ceremony on the boat before the Vikings leave, you don't ask the question, how does the magical ceremony actually protect us from the boat sinking? it's been told over and over again. You sort of just end up going along with it. And we've even had a little bit of support for this theory in things like the Hinman speech, where we were told that Ethereum wasn't a security because it was decentralized. That very meager stamp of approval, depending on your perspective, this has been argued ad nauseum in relation to the Ripple SEC case. But just that very meager stamp of approval was enough for a lot of people in crypto to believe if a project's decentralized, it can pretty much do anything, and the authorities aren't going to be able even to do anything about it. The problem with this story we've been telling ourselves all along has been that these projects don't code themselves. These projects are developed by someone. And here we have the authorities when the government's incentive was big enough, dealing with, North Korean hacker group Lazarus. Really hot button issue. The US government doesn't like it when North Korea is hacking anybody. When the incentive is big enough, they go after the one weak point, the Achilles heel of all these projects. And that's that there are humans who kicked these things off. There are humans that coded these projects. These aren't like AI coded projects. There are actual humans out there who can be arrested. I mean, there was a reason that Satoshi Nakamoto was anonymous. And you can argue that Satoshi knew somehow that the project would weather the storms of politics and, interpersonal relationships, all those kinds of things better if there was no founder. But my sincere belief is that Satoshi also knew that the developer of any kind of cryptocurrency project, albeit just the first one in Satoshi's case, was going to be the Achilles heel of the project as far as governments and regulators go, because that developer could always be arrested. And the only way for Satoshi to completely mitigate that risk was by not existing. With this arrest, we've definitely crossed into some new territory here, because unlike Satoshi, especially a lot of the DeFi platform developers who came long after Satoshi, maybe just because they bought into this myth, maybe because they needed the trust of the community in order to achieve greater levels of user adoption, for whatever reason, a lot of these platform developers have not been anonymous. They're known people that are doxxed to some extent. They can be found by law enforcement and other regulators. And with this arrest, what we know now is that when governments have a large enough incentive, they will go after these developers of decentralized open source projects. So now it's not a question of, is decentralization and open sourcing some kind of magical shield that just conceptually shields you from the actions of regulators and law enforcement. That's no longer the question, because we know as a matter of fact, it is not a shield. but it's now just a question of how big does the motivation have to be for a government to go after the developer who coded a project like this? Is it big enough if the SEC thinks that what your platform is transacting in are securities? Because if that's the case, then that's a whole lot of the entire DeFi space. Is it a big enough incentive if criminals might just be using your platform? In this case, when we read through this announcement on the arrest from the Netherlands authorities, they say he is suspected of involvement in concealing criminal financial flows and facilitating money laundering through the mixing of cryptocurrencies through the decentralized Ethereum mixing service, Tornado Cash. Multiple arrests are not ruled out. These advanced technologies, such as decentralized organizations that may facilitate money laundering, are receiving extra attention from the FIOD. Also in the cryptocurrency domain, the FIOD stands for Safe Financial Netherlands and investigates with effect and impact. Today, the suspect is brought before the examining judge, and they go through and explain how they they sort of understand what a DAO is, and they don't care at all. They go on and on telling you what a DAO is, and they are not slowed down at all. They're just like, yeah, great. Yeah, sounds like this DAO is doing criminal stuff, so we're gonna go after the DAO. And there's no talk at all about the decentralization inherent in a well-functioning DAO being some kind of shield for the developers. That's not what they're saying at all. They're just like, oh, we're intrigued by this obvious criminal organization, and we're definitely going to go after the developers. Unfortunately, if we start thinking about what kinds of crypto platforms might be useful and used by different types of criminals, it probably includes a lot of the DeFi world, and unfortunately, maybe even the base layers. This is a problem. Here you can see this post speculating US validators, which includes very powerful Coinbase, are going to push for protocol level censorship. They can't self-help by merely avoiding facilitation of blocks containing US sanctioned transactions, because under certain conditions, they might be dramatically slashed from doing so. So what he's saying here is we've got transactions that are going to continue happening from sanctioned platforms like Tornado Cash. And validators are going to be running into blocks. They're going to run into blocks that they could validate that are going to contain these transactions. So they're going to start asking questions like, am I violating sanctions by validating a block, by putting a block in the ledger that contains these transactions? And the problem is in Ethereum 2.0, for which Coinbase, a giant public company, is a validator. Coinbase, if they decide, if a company like Coinbase or any other validator on the ETH2 network decides that they're not going to sign a block because they've detected that there are transactions in there emanating from some kind of sanctioned entity or platform like Tornado Cash, there's a problem, because if they don't commit that block to the ledger in Ethereum 2.0, not only do you get slashed if you do something the network thinks is malicious, you also have inactivity penalties. I believe they call it inactivity leaking. And you can be financially penalized for not committing blocks to the ledger when you should. So for a company like Coinbase, those aren't two good alternatives: risk violating sanctions or get financially penalized because you don't want to commit this block to the ledger and violate the sanctions. So what he's speculating here is that big actors who are involved in validation, like Coinbase, are going to have to put pressure on the protocol itself, on the Ethereum blockchain, to make it so that you are allowed to not validate these transactions coming from sanctioned platforms. This is a big change. This would be the admission of some level of censorship at the base protocol level itself. We don't really know where this is going to go. And even the author of this post says that, it's possible there could be some kind of a bill or something to create a safe harbor for the validation of transactions from, sanctioned entities or something like that. I think just like it's logical to come to the conclusion that Romulus and Remus weren't actually nursed by a she-wolf, it's also time for us to abandon this myth that decentralization and open source code, all of these things, are some kind of effective shield against regulation and law enforcement. If they decide they want you, they're not going to care about the decentralization piece. It's actually not any kind of defense at all against regulators and law enforcement. Today, we also got this video from Virtua with some updates on Cardano Island. I thought one of the most interesting items was a discussion around the different types of game development engines and how certain game engines are going to be good for certain platforms. And this is, of course, common sense. They point out, hey, Unreal Engine 5 has the very high fidelity graphics, but UE5 doesn't want to be run in a browser. They'll have to use certain graphics engines for mobile. Others will work better for users who might be using, high-end gaming PCs. But it seems like they're very focused on having a bunch of different ways to access Cardano Island for the different types of users. There was also quite a bit of talk about the gamification elements in Cardano Island. In fact, if you look down here in the description box, they even say Virtua, a gamified metaverse. I think that might have been a little bit unclear to a lot of us in Cardano, kind of learning about Virtua's approach to Cardano Island. I think it was a little bit unclear how strong the gamification elements would be, but it sounds like one of the first games involving VFlex is going to be quite a bit more detailed than I was probably expecting. They were talking about there being sort of antagonists called deflex, and the vflex are kind of fighting against the deflex. So I think some of the gamification elements are going to be quite a bit more complicated than at least I was expecting. And they also did quite a bit of talk about sort of the natural resources gamified elements with the wood and the sticky goo and all those kind of things. So it sounds like they're putting quite a bit of thought into the gamification pieces of Cardano Island and the rest of Virtua Prime. They did mention, though, that as new features came out, because Cardano Island was the first, it was kind of like the pioneering effort, and the Cardano ecosystem people who are participating in Virtua are kind of like the pioneers in Virtua. When new features come out in Virtua Prime, they're going to bring them to Cardano Island first. They also talked about next steps for Cardano Island. So it sounds like they have 2 events planned. So the first event will be some kind of a sort of parcel location picking event where we'll have some kind of maybe an overhead map of all of Cardano Island, and we'll get to go in and just pick out the location of our parcels. At some point after that, there will be another event, and this will be the event where we can actually use our parcels for the first time. And it sounds like they're actually planning for that to launch with voice over IP and multi-user. I think this is pretty important because we've got this spectrum of metaverses that are going to exist. Some will be very heavily into the gamification piece. Some will be more into the social metaverse piece, sort of like just a 3D evolution of social media platforms. And I think for the metaverse projects that don't have the ability for users to talk to other users, like if you can't talk to other users inside that metaverse, I think they're going to end up relegated more to the gamified part of that spectrum and less to the social metaverse side of the spectrum. We also got some good new information about cornucopias from Rob and Josh on Kopi Cafe. So for this episode, Rob was in the Canary Islands, and we found out about the 4th zone of cornucopias. We previously knew about the first 3 zones. There's zone 1, which is Solace, patterned after the English countryside. Zone 2 is an Old West zone, Esperanza. Zone 3 is patterned after Asia, it sounds like. It's called Fortune. And Zone 4 will be patterned after the Canary Islands. And Rob mentioned a couple of times that the sort of black volcanic sand of the Canary Islands may play a significant role in Zone 4. We also got to see some screenshots from the mobile game. It looks like this. You've got your little guys with rifles up on top of the train, defending it from these bandits down here who unfortunately only seem to have hatchets to attack the train. So you definitely pick the right side, being on the side of the guys with actual firearms. And it's in testing right now. So there's actual gameplay footage on YouTube right now. If you search for it, you can actually watch people playing the game. We also found out about custom domes. So it sounds like the timing of the custom dome sale is sort of still on the table. They wanted to schedule. Sounds like they wanted to schedule it for sometime close to the end of the month, but it depends on when Vossel happens. If the Vossel Hard Fork Combinator event happens sooner, then they say we will be forced to move the sale to a sooner date. They just want to make sure everybody's prepared. So it could happen at the end of the month, but if Voxel happens sooner than everybody thinks, then they might have to push up the date of the custom dome sale. And here in their Discord, they've revealed the pricing, and those copious size custom domes are pretty expensive. I think when the Virtua sale went down, I kind of mentioned that Virtua's largest plots were, at the time, I thought the most expensive Cardano metaverse plots I had seen. But I think the copious custom domes, in fact, will end up being the most expensive sort of mint price for a Cardano metaverse plot that I've seen. But again, these are very large. These custom domes will be very large plots. They mentioned that dome sizes are roughly 5x larger than land plots. So a copious custom dome will be very, very large indeed. And these are, as near as I can tell, these are kind of meant for people who want to create their own projects. If you want to have your own sort of little game within a game for, any kind of entrepreneurial use you can come up with, that's kind of what these custom domes are for. And it sounds like there will be certain templates available for you to build things inside the custom domes. So I think there's going to be quite a bit going on with these custom domes. But I think these will be the most expensive Cardano metaverse parcels we've seen to date. Finally, we've got some more Robbery Forest action for you. At this point, I feel like we could almost have like a daily segment on the Robbery Forest, and it would pretty much come through every single day. It seems like every single day there's another exploit or hack or scam or rug pull to talk about. This one, just in, hackers printed 1.2 billion AUSD on the Akala network through an exploit. What is the Akala network, you ask? The Akala network says Akala is a decentralized finance network powering the AUSD ecosystem, DeFi on Polkadot, hiring $250 million AUSD ecosystem fund. It's too bad that their ecosystem fund pales in comparison to the size of this reported exploit. They say, we have identified the issue as a misconfiguration, just a misconfiguration, a simple misconfiguration. Nothing to see here, guys. It's just a tiny misconfiguration of the IBTC/AUSD liquidity pool, which went live earlier today. That resulted in error mints of a significant amount of AUSD. Down here, they say the misconfiguration has since been rectified, and wallet addresses that received the erroneously minted AUSD have been identified, with on-chain activity tracing in respect of these addresses underway. I'll let you be the judge if a $1.2 billion exploit can be characterized as just a misconfiguration. But I hope you're starting out a great week, and I will talk to you tomorrow.